The moment Jonathan Roumie spoke, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Lex Fridman, calm, collected, and known for his measured demeanor, suddenly seemed like an ordinary man caught off guard. You could almost feel the electricity through the cameras, the microphones, and even across the screens of thousands of viewers watching live. It started innocuously. Jonathan had just sat down in the studio, a quiet confidence radiating from him. His posture was relaxed, but there was a weight in his eyes, a story waiting to be told. Lex greeted him with his usual warm smile, unaware that this episode would quickly become one of the most talked about moments in his podcast history. Jonathan began to speak, but not about his latest projects, movies, or public appearances. Instead, he started with something far more personal, a memory, a struggle, a lesson that had shaped his life in ways the public rarely sees. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but each word carried an invisible gravity. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't exaggerated, it was real. And that reality was enough to make the air in the studio feel heavier. Lex listened intently, nodding occasionally, but even he couldn't mask the shift happening within him. Normally composed, he leaned forward, his hands resting on the table, as if bracing for the weight of Jonathan's words. The camera caught it, the subtle tightening around his eyes, the slight quiver in his lips. Those who were watching live started noticing too. Comments exploded, as Lex tearing up. "I can't believe what Jonathan just said. This is too real." Jonathan spoke about faith, resilience, and moments of doubt that almost broke him. He shared a story so personal that it felt like he was inviting every viewer, every listener, into his own heart. And it worked. By the time he finished his first few sentences, Lex's stoic mask had begun to crack. You could see it in the pause, the way he exhaled softly, almost involuntarily. It wasn't just the words, it was the authenticity behind them. Every gesture, every pause, every careful choice of phrase carried an honesty that is rare in any interview, live or recorded. Jonathan's story wasn't sensational, it was human, raw, and relatable, and in that moment, it struck Lex like a lightning bolt. The audience online felt it too. Thousands of fans were glued to their screens, cameras capturing every reaction, comments streaming faster than anyone could read. Some viewers replayed the clip instantly, not believing what they had just witnessed. Others shared it with friends whispering, "You have to see this, Lex Fridman actually got emotional." And yet, Jonathan didn't stop. He continued with calm composure, letting the moment linger, allowing Lex and the viewers to feel the full impact. No theatrics, no overacting, just truth. By the end of the first 5 minutes, it was clear this wasn't going to be an ordinary podcast. Something profound had just begun. A moment that fans would talk about for weeks. A conversation that would leave Lex Fridman and the audience forever changed. It was a quiet evening in the studio, the kind of calm that almost feels sacred. Lex Fridman, known for his measured voice, thoughtful pauses, and uncanny ability to make guests feel seen, adjusted his microphone and leaned slightly forward. The soft hum of the cameras, the faint click of the recording equipment, and the low buzz of anticipation from the small crew created a subtle tension, the kind of tension that signals something important is about to happen. Jonathan Roumie walked in, and immediately the energy shifted. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't seeking attention. There was no entourage, no fanfare, just him, walking in like someone who had seen the world, absorbed its lessons, and was finally ready to share them. His eyes, calm but piercing, scanned the room as if weighing every detail, every sound. He carried a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself, but makes you notice anyway. Lex smiled warmly. "Jonathan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here," he said. His tone was casual, almost conversational, but there was an underlying curiosity. Lex had interviewed countless people, scientists, philosophers, actors, and even spiritual leaders. But there was always one thing he couldn't predict, the moments when someone's story would break through the usual patterns. Jonathan nodded, returning the greeting with a faint smile. "Thank you, Lex. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation." His words were simple, but they carried a weight, a sense that what was about to be shared would go beyond typical podcast chatter. As the cameras rolled and the recording began, the studio seemed to shrink around them, creating a kind of intimacy. Lex started with his usual opening, questions about career, inspiration, and the public perception of Jonathan's work. But it didn't take long before the conversation pivoted. Jonathan had a way of steering the discussion naturally, without force, toward something deeper, something personal. "Many people know me for my roles, for what they see on screen," Jonathan began, his voice steady but imbued with quiet emotion. But very few know the challenges, the doubts, the moments where I questioned everything I believed in. Lex listened intently. He had heard similar statements from countless guests, yet there was something different here. Jonathan wasn't speaking to impress or perform, he was speaking to connect. His words were deliberate, and each sentence seemed carefully chosen, yet completely authentic. The camera caught a subtle shift in Lex's expression. Normally composed, he leaned in slightly, his hands resting on the table, eyes fixed on Jonathan as if to absorb every detail. The crew behind the cameras leaned forward too, sensing the gravity in the room. The chat on the livestream began to buzz. Fans immediately noticed the unusual tension. Comments like, "Jonathan's energy is different tonight," and "Lex is leaning in, something big is coming," began to scroll rapidly. Jonathan shared a story from his childhood, a moment of doubt that many wouldn't even imagine he had faced. It was intimate, raw, and yet delivered with the calm precision of someone who had faced these fears head-on. He spoke of struggles that were not just personal, but universal: fear of failure, moments of isolation, and the quiet, invisible battles we all fight within ourselves. Lex's usual calmness began to show cracks, small but noticeable. A brief pause here, a subtle nod there, the faint glisten of moisture near his eyes. He was being pulled into the story in a way that went beyond intellectual curiosity. He was feeling it, and the audience watching could feel it too. There was a magnetic pull to the screen, a collective understanding that this wasn't just an interview. This was something deeper. Jonathan continued, describing moments when faith, perseverance, and personal reflection became his lifeline. His hands moved gently as he spoke, emphasizing points not with exaggeration, but with natural, expressive gestures. Each anecdote built on the previous, layering a tapestry of resilience and vulnerability that drew everyone, Lex, the crew, the live audience, closer to the moment of truth. Lex finally spoke, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "It's remarkable to hear you share this. Many people wouldn't even be willing to admit such things, let alone speak about them so openly." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in the room. "It's inspiring." Jonathan smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "It's not about being inspiring, it's about being honest. About letting people know that struggling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." The crew and live audience exchanged glances. The comments exploded. "Did Lex just tear up? Jonathan is hitting deep tonight. This is why I love this podcast." The atmosphere had transformed entirely from a routine interview to a moment of genuine human connection, a rare instance where both the guest and host were fully present, fully vulnerable. And in that tension, in that stillness before the next words fell, everyone, Lex, Jonathan, and the viewers, felt it, the weight of something monumental about to unfold. Something that would leave no one in the room, nor anyone watching, unchanged. The room felt impossibly still, though the cameras hummed and the microphones captured every subtle sound. Jonathan Roumie's voice remained calm, but the story he was about to tell carried a weight that no one, not even Lex Fridman, could ignore. "I want to share a moment," Jonathan began, his gaze steady and almost piercing, "when I questioned everything I believed about myself, about God, about purpose, about whether the life I was living had meaning at all." Lex's usual composure wavered. His hands gripped the table lightly, knuckles pale, as he leaned forward. There was a quiet intensity in the way he watched Jonathan, not a question, not a judgment, but pure attention. The kind of attention reserved for moments that demand reverence. Jonathan's story unfolded slowly, each sentence deliberate. He spoke of years in the public eye, where expectations weighed heavier than applause. He recounted nights of doubt, moments when the spotlight felt less like recognition and more like a magnifying glass on his flaws. "I'd lie awake thinking, is this who I'm supposed to be? Am I enough?" His voice was steady yet soft, and each word seemed to resonate against the walls of the studio, as if echoing in the hearts of everyone present. Lex nodded, but something deeper stirred. Normally he would respond with questions, gently guiding the conversation. But tonight, Lex was listening, absorbing every word. The audience could see it. Subtle movements, a tightening of the jaw, a pause mid-breath, a flicker in his eyes, betrayed a rare human vulnerability. He wasn't just analyzing Jonathan's story, he was feeling it. Jonathan paused, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged, alive, expectant. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower. "And in those moments, when doubt threatened to consume me, I learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about having the courage to rise again. And that courage comes from something greater than ourselves. Lex's voice trembled almost imperceptibly as he responded. I can feel that. It's overwhelming sometimes, isn't it? Jonathan nodded, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It is. And it's okay to acknowledge it, to let yourself feel it. Because those feelings are what connect us, not just to others, but to ourselves. At that moment, the energy in the studio shifted entirely. The crew exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The chat exploded with real-time reactions. Lex just got emotional. Jonathan's words hit me like a punch. I've never seen him this moved before. Jonathan's hands moved gently as he described a pivotal memory, a moment when he had reached the brink of despair, but found guidance in faith, in humility, and in the small acts of kindness that often go unnoticed. I realized that life isn't about perfection, he said. It's about persistence, empathy, and having the courage to be vulnerable. To show your heart, even when the world expects armor. Lex's eyes glistened. He swallowed hard, a brief, shaky inhale betraying a crack in his usual stoic demeanor. I don't think I've ever felt that truth so clearly. It's almost unbearable in its honesty. The room's tension thickened, almost palpable. Jonathan continued, sharing anecdotes from his personal life, losses, failures, and moments when he had felt completely alone. And yet, through each story, a thread of hope persisted, a quiet reminder that vulnerability is strength, and that authenticity can create profound connection. Lex, normally the master of measured responses, finally let a pause linger longer than usual. His hands rested lightly on the table as if he were holding himself together. Jonathan, thank you for sharing this. I don't often feel this moved, but, he trailed off, voice catching slightly. He glanced down, then back up, eyes shimmering. It's real, and it matters. The viewers at home erupted in the comments. Clips began circulating instantly. Did Lex just tear up on live podcast? Jonathan, Roumie is changing lives. I can't believe I'm watching this in real time. Jonathan, however, remained composed, almost serene. He had shared his story not for applause, not for sympathy, but to create a moment of truth, a bridge between vulnerability and understanding. And he had achieved it. Lex, usually reserved, was now visibly impacted. His posture shifted, his voice softened, and his gaze remained locked on Jonathan, absorbing the lesson fully. The audience felt it too, the weight of every word, the sincerity, the courage to reveal inner struggles. For a brief, shining moment, the studio ceased to be just a recording space. It became a sacred place where humanity, emotion, and truth converged. And in that tension, in that raw, unguarded exchange, it became clear this wasn't just a conversation. It was a confrontation with authenticity, a collision of human experiences, and a lesson that even the most composed among us are moved by honesty and courage. By the end of the segment, everyone in the studio, and the countless viewers watching live, felt the impact, a quiet awe, a reminder that true connection comes when walls fall away, and hearts are allowed to speak freely. For a moment, the studio was silent. Not the calm of empty space, but the quiet that comes when something extraordinary has just happened. A collective pause where every eye, every mind, every heartbeat is fully tuned to a single, undeniable truth. Lex Fridman leaned back slightly in his chair, his hands resting lightly on the table. His eyes, usually so composed and analytical, were glistening with the weight of raw emotion. He swallowed hard, as if the words Jonathan had shared had penetrated deeper than he expected. The pause between breaths stretched, thick with gravity, as everyone in the room, the cameras, the crew, and Lex himself felt the impact of the story. Jonathan, calm and collected, simply watched. There was no triumph, no need for applause. He had shared his truth, and that was enough. But he could feel the effect ripple outward, and he knew that the moment was bigger than himself. It had already begun to reach every person listening, every viewer watching live on screens across the globe. The production crew, usually motionless behind their cameras, exchanged astonished glances. The director whispered something to the camera operator, who nodded, barely able to keep his own eyes off Lex. Even the sound engineer, who normally avoided engagement, leaned slightly forward, caught in the tension of the room. They were all witnessing a rare phenomenon, a human connection so profound it seemed to suspend time itself. Lex finally spoke, his voice softer than ever. I don't know how to put this into words. Jonathan, that was more than a story. It was a mirror. He paused, his throat tightening as he tried to maintain composure. It's the kind of truth that hits you when you least expect it. The audience watching live erupted in the chat. Comments scrolled faster than anyone could read. Lex just got emotional. Jonathan Roumie is a legend. I can't believe he's tearing up. This is why I watch this podcast, moments like this. Some viewers were recording clips on their phones, eager to share with friends, family, or social media, knowing they had just witnessed something historic. Jonathan didn't interrupt. He let Lex respond, allowing the emotion to unfold naturally. You've reminded me, Lex continued, voice catching slightly, that even in the moments when we feel isolated, misunderstood, or overwhelmed, there's a bridge, a connection to others that we often overlook. And it's through honesty, through vulnerability that we find it. Jonathan nodded gently. Exactly. That's why I share these experiences. Not to be heroic, not to be seen, but to remind others that they are not alone in their struggles. The impact was tangible. Lex leaned forward again, hands gripping the edge of the table lightly. I think many people fear vulnerability because they believe it makes them weak. But your story, it proves the opposite. Strength isn't in hiding your pain. Strength is in acknowledging it and moving forward anyway. A subtle hush fell over the studio. Even the crew, trained to ignore the guest and focus on technical details, seemed frozen in the gravity of the moment. It was as if Jonathan and Lex had created a bubble of authenticity, a shared space that drew in everyone present. The viewers at home weren't just watching, they were feeling it. The livestream chat overflowed with reactions, tears in real time. This is life, changing. Jonathan Roumie just taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Clips were being shared instantly, and social media notifications lit up as the story began to go viral. Memes would form, articles would be written, but the essence of the moment, the quiet, unfiltered human connection, would remain untouchable, unreplicable. Lex finally exhaled slowly, leaning back with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He looked at Jonathan with a reverence rarely displayed. You've done something remarkable tonight. You've reminded us that emotion, honesty, and courage aren't weaknesses. They're the essence of what makes us human. Jonathan's expression softened. It's not about me. It's about everyone watching, everyone listening. If one person feels less alone, then it's enough. A low murmur of appreciation filled the studio. Lex nodded again, his gaze lingering. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was sacred. There was no rush, no pressure, just a shared understanding that a rare and meaningful exchange had occurred. Outside the studio, fans were already dissecting every second of the live stream. Screenshots of Lex's emotional expression circulated on forums and social media. Clips of Jonathan's calm, grounding presence went viral almost instantly. People commented about how rare it was to see someone like Lex Fridman, usually so measured, visibly affected. And yet, the most important part wasn't the fame or the clips. It was the emotional resonance, the momentary but profound connection that left an indelible mark on everyone involved. And in that charged atmosphere, a truth became clear. Real connection isn't manufactured, scripted, or performed. It is born when vulnerability meets understanding, when honesty is met with empathy, and when two people, regardless of status, fame, or reputation, dare to truly feel. By the end of the segment, the reaction was unanimous. This wasn't just another podcast episode. It was a masterclass in human authenticity, a reminder that emotion is not weakness, and that even the most composed among us can be touched, changed, and humbled by truth. The room was thick with emotion, the kind that makes time feel suspended. Every second stretched, carrying the weight of honesty, vulnerability, and unspoken understanding. Lex Fridman, who had spent years interviewing some of the brightest minds, sat leaning slightly forward, his hands lightly gripping the table. His eyes shimmered, betraying a rare glimpse of emotion that few ever saw on camera. Jonathan Roumie, calm yet purposeful, continued his story, shifting now from the struggles to the revelation that had shaped him the most. There was a moment when I realized that the life I thought I needed, the roles, the recognition, the applause, none of that could fill the emptiness I felt inside. I was searching for purpose outside of myself, when everything I needed had been within all along. Lex's gaze softened. He nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, letting the words sink in. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Even the crew behind the cameras, trained to remain neutral and unseen, felt the gravity of the moment. Jonathan's voice dropped slightly, carrying the weight of his confession. I had built walls around myself for years, walls of fear, of pride, of trying to meet expectations. But one day, I realized that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a doorway. A doorway to connection, to understanding, to true courage. And when I stepped through it, I found not only strength but peace. A hush fell across the studio. Lex's usually composed face betrayed a flicker of awe. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quieter than usual, filled with reverence. I think I understand now. It's not the accolades that define us. It's the willingness to be honest, to show up, to be fully human even when it's uncomfortable. Jonathan nodded, his calm expression steady, almost serene. Exactly. That honesty, that willingness to be real. Even when it's painful, it's what leaves an impact. Not on screens, not in headlines, but in hearts. Lex leaned back for a moment, absorbing every word. Then, as if unable to contain the depth of feeling any longer, his voice trembled slightly. Jonathan, I've interviewed hundreds of people, read countless stories, but I can't remember a time when someone's words hit me this deeply. You've made me see something essential. Something I didn't even know I was missing. Jonathan's smile was gentle. That's the thing. Sometimes we don't know what we need to hear until someone brave enough shares it. And then it happened. Lex's voice caught, a subtle quiver betraying a tear forming at the corner of his eye. He quickly glanced away, embarrassed. But the moment was irreversible. Every viewer watching the live stream noticed it. Comments exploded. Lex is crying. Jonathan just broke him. I can't believe this is real. The chat moved faster than anyone could read, a digital flood of emotion echoing the one in the studio. Jonathan remained composed, serene, almost meditative. It's okay, Lex, he said softly. It's okay to feel. That's the point. That's what makes us alive. It's not the roles we play, the masks we wear, or the expectations we meet. It's the courage to confront ourselves, to acknowledge what's real. Lex wiped at his eyes, his voice low, almost whispering. I've spent so much time trying to measure life by logic, by outcomes, by achievement, and I forgot this. I forgot that what truly matters is being present, being honest, and connecting with people. The room seemed to pulse with the weight of truth. The production crew barely moved. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, capturing every delicate shift in expression. Jonathan's revelation was no longer just a personal story. It had become a mirror for Lex, for the audience, for anyone watching, a reflection of what it means to live authentically, to embrace vulnerability, and to honor the human heart. Jonathan continued, his voice calm, resonant, unwavering. If sharing this moment with you helps even one person feel seen, feel understood, feel brave enough to face their own doubts, then it's worth it. That's why we show up. That's why we allow ourselves to be real, even when it's terrifying. Lex's breathing grew deeper, more intentional, as he let the words settle. Then, softly, almost reverently, he said, Jonathan, thank you. I don't know if I can fully express it, but you've reminded all of us that life is about courage, about honesty, about being human in the purest sense. The chat on the live stream surged with thousands of messages. I feel this too. I'm tearing up. Jonathan, Roumie just gave me hope. This is one of the most powerful interviews ever. Clips were instantly shared, moments replayed, and viewers reflected on their own lives, suddenly aware of the fragility and beauty of being human. Jonathan's gaze met Lex's. There was no need for applause, no need for dramatics. The revelation was complete. It had landed. The audience felt it. Lex felt it. Even those behind the cameras felt it. The power of authenticity, the strength of vulnerability, and the beauty of courage had been fully revealed. And in that sacred silence, it was clear this wasn't just a podcast. It was a life lesson, a moment of truth, a revelation that would resonate long after the cameras stopped rolling. Jonathan, Roumie had shared his heart, Lex had received it with honesty, and the audience had witnessed something unforgettable. It was a moment that transcended entertainment, a human story raw and profound, that reminded everyone watching that strength comes from vulnerability, and impact comes from truth. The studio settled into a different rhythm after that climactic moment. The intensity that had filled the room gradually softened into something quieter, gentler, a reverent calm. Lex Fridman leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply, a faint, reflective smile on his face. The tension in his shoulders had eased, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. Jonathan, Roumie, as composed as ever, sat quietly, letting the moment linger. He didn't need to fill the air with words or explanations. The weight of what had transpired was already understood by everyone present. The connection forged in that intimate space didn't require commentary. It was felt deeply, universally, Lex finally spoke, his voice steady but softer than usual, imbued with reflection. "Jonathan, I've interviewed so many incredible people over the years, but this has been different. I feel changed. Seeing someone embrace honesty and vulnerability with such courage, it's rare, and it's inspiring." Jonathan nodded. "That's why I share these moments, not for recognition, not for applause, but to remind people that authenticity matters. That showing your heart isn't a weakness, it's a strength. And it's contagious." Lex's eyes lingered on Jonathan for a moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They had both participated in something bigger than a simple podcast interview. This had become a shared experience of truth, a moment of human connection so rare that it would linger in memory long after the recording stopped. The crew behind the cameras exhaled quietly. They had been witnesses to something extraordinary, an emotional honesty that transcended ordinary production. The assistant director whispered to the sound engineer, "We'll be talking about this for weeks." The engineer nodded silently, his attention still drawn to Lex's expressive, reflective demeanor. Meanwhile, viewers online continued reacting in real time. Comments poured in. "I've never felt so connected to a podcast before."
"Jonathan's words are life-changing."
"Lex actually tearing up. This is historic." The live stream chat overflowed with empathy, inspiration, and gratitude. Clips were already being shared, sparking conversation on social media forums and personal messages. People weren't just watching, they were reflecting, reevaluating, and connecting with their own experiences. Jonathan spoke again, breaking the silence with his calm, measured voice. "It's moments like these that remind us why we share our stories. Vulnerability isn't about impressing others, it's about touching hearts. It's about creating spaces where honesty is welcomed and strength is redefined. Every one of us has struggles, doubts, fears, and every one of us has the capacity to rise above them, to connect, and to heal." Lex nodded, visibly moved, his voice catching briefly. That's exactly it. I've been reminded tonight that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's simply showing up, being real and facing your own fears. Watching you share this, Jonathan, has reminded me that the human heart, our emotions, our empathy, is the most powerful force we have. The room remained quiet for a few moments, filled with the reverberation of those words. Jonathan leaned back slightly, a serene expression on his face, and looked around the studio. There was a subtle energy shift. The heaviness of raw emotion had been replaced with a warm, reflective calm. Everyone present could feel it, the catharsis, the clarity, and the impact of shared human truth. As the cameras continued rolling, capturing the concluding moments of the episode, Jonathan smiled faintly. "If there's one thing I hope people take away from tonight, it's that being human is enough. You don't need perfection, approval, or applause. You need honesty, courage, and the willingness to face yourself with compassion. And when we do that, we inspire others to do the same." Lex nodded again, his gaze steady. "I will carry this with me for a long time. I hope everyone watching does as well. Jonathan, thank you for reminding all of us, including me, that real strength comes from truth, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable." Outside the studio, fans continued to react. The live stream clips went viral almost instantly. People shared screenshots of Lex's reflective expressions, Jonathan's calm composure, and the rare emotional honesty that had been captured in real time. Discussions erupted online, not just about the interview, but about the lessons it imparted about empathy, courage, vulnerability, and the power of sharing one's story. By the time the recording ended, the room was filled with a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't the kind of satisfaction that comes from a job well done. It was deeper, more profound. It was the feeling of having participated in a moment that mattered, that would ripple far beyond the studio walls, far beyond the screens of those watching, and into the hearts of anyone willing to pause, listen, and feel. Jonathan Roumie stood, extending a hand to Lex. "Thank you," he said softly, "for listening, for letting this moment happen." Lex shook his hand firmly, a smile breaking across his face. "No, thank you, for reminding us all what it means to be human." And in that simple exchange, the episode and the moment reached its resolution, a quiet, lasting testament to the transformative power of honesty, courage, and connection. The cameras had stopped rolling, the lights dimmed, and the studio's quiet hum returned. But the energy lingered, a gentle, enduring echo of the moment that had unfolded just minutes before. What had begun as a routine podcast had transformed into something far greater. A human connection so raw, so authentic, it would remain with everyone present for a long time. Jonathan Roumie sat back in his chair, his calm demeanor unchanged, yet his eyes carried a quiet wisdom. He had shared a story born of struggle, vulnerability, and courage, and in doing so, had created a space where honesty was not only welcomed, but celebrated. He had reminded everyone that strength isn't measured by appearances, success, or recognition, but by the courage to confront one's own truth and to allow others to see it. Lex Fridman, usually the composed observer, had been visibly affected. He exhaled slowly, a reflective smile on his face, understanding something profound. "Moments like this," he said softly, "remind me why we listen, why we engage, why we seek to understand one another. Truth and vulnerability are the bridges that connect us, even across screens, continents, and experiences." The lesson was clear. True respect and connection aren't conditional. They aren't earned through fame, wealth, or status. They are offered freely, to anyone willing to meet another human being with openness and honesty. Jonathan's words, and the response they elicited from Lex, demonstrated that courage isn't about dramatic gestures or bold declarations. It's about quiet consistency, integrity, and empathy. The audience watching online had already begun to feel the impact. Screens filled with comments, messages, and shares. "I've never felt so understood. This reminds me to be honest with myself. Jonathan Roumie just taught me to embrace vulnerability." People reflected on their own struggles, realizing that connection begins with authenticity, and that moments of emotional honesty can ripple far beyond their origin. Even outside the digital space, the lesson was universal. In offices, living rooms, classrooms, and cafes, viewers discussed the episode, replayed clips, and shared their own experiences. The conversation wasn't just about Jonathan Roumie or Lex Fridman. It was about the reminder that human emotion is powerful, necessary, and transformative. That allowing yourself to feel, to empathize, and to connect is one of the greatest acts of courage anyone can perform. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, speaking directly to those who had been watching. "If there's one thing I hope everyone takes from this, it's this: vulnerability is not weakness. Honesty is not a flaw. Empathy is not optional. Each of us carries stories, struggles, and moments of doubt, and each of us has the ability to turn those into bridges, into lessons, into connections that matter." Lex nodded, his gaze warm and steady. "And it's not just about listening to someone else's story," he added. "It's about acknowledging your own." As the studio cleared, the lesson remained. Respect, empathy, and vulnerability are timeless values. They transcend culture, fame, and circumstance. They remind us that the most meaningful connections aren't made in moments of grandeur, but in moments of honesty, shared struggles, and emotional courage. Jonathan and Lex exchanged a final glance, a silent understanding passing between them. No words were needed. The moment had spoken for itself. And for the viewers, the message was clear: life's most important lessons are learned not from success or accolades, but from truth, courage, and the willingness to embrace our shared humanity. So, to everyone watching, everyone listening, and everyone reflecting, allow yourself to feel, to connect, and to be real. Because that is where strength resides. That is where courage lives. And that is where change begins. Type Humamata in the comments if you believe vulnerability is true strength. And tell us where you're watching from. Let's celebrate every brave heart willing to face their own truth.